Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. We come today to send an urgent message across the state and under the Gold Dome, and that is that Georgia is on emergency status. We have programs that are on a slender lifeline. We have massive cuts across the state that affect families, that affect seniors, that affect children, that affect our schools. We are in a crisis of the highest order. We have a $4 billion hole between the budget that we had in 2009. We were funding our needs in 2009 with a budget. We now have shrunk down to where we have $4 billion in the red, and each year that's meant cutting programs. We are now eliminating services to the blind through the Center for the Visually Impaired. We're now eliminating 20,000 hours of basic support for families who are coping with the challenge of an Alzheimer's patient in their family. We are eliminating programs that our seniors depend upon. We are cutting at every turn. Georgians need to wake up now and sound the alarm. Don't wait till it's too late. Don't wait till this legislative session ends and people go home. We are calling now today for a robust, common sense approach of finding the revenues to meet the needs of our people. Just last year, our food stamp needs across this state increased by 1/3. But we're cutting the workforce that sets people up to get food stamps. Wrong ideas, wrong approaches. Last week, another 3% across-the-board reduction was ordered for all our departments. The Adult Protective Services for disabled adults and elders cut. The reduction of 34,000 one-way trips for seniors who have to have transportation in order to get their medical needs met. While we watch the cuts, while we watch the programs bled dry, while we watch public employees laid off in record numbers across this state, people are suffering now, and that suffering is going to become more intense. When a county has a workforce in Middle Georgia that is 30% public employees, that's people working with the mentally ill, people working at all levels of state government providing services to our citizens, we're plunging counties into a job crisis by the furloughed teachers and the laid-off public employees. We're going in the wrong direction. Last week, the Lieutenant Governor's task force came out with recommendations, many of which we would be very well advised to adopt. We're here today to bring the message to Georgians. Contact your legislator now. Contact the governor, the lieutenant governor, the speaker now, and let them know Georgia's economy and Georgia's communities and Georgia's families cannot survive through the serious and deep and grave budget cuts that are going on now. We need leadership in this state to find common sense relief remedies, and that means adopting bills that are before the legislature now that would bring in revenues to avoid these deadly cuts. Why are we balancing our budget on the backs of Georgia's most vulnerable? The elderly, the children, the disabled, while we're damaging our public school system and our public health infrastructure irreparably. Georgia's going in the wrong direction. We call for a change of direction now in Georgia. I want to introduce Representative Virgil Flood, co-chair of the Working Families Legislative Caucus, a member of the House of Representatives from the counties of Fayette and Fulton.
Thank you, Senator Gore. What we really want to emphasize is that the time to act is now. We still got one more day, a final day. Crossover day is tomorrow, and we still have an opportunity to pass legislation that allows for a fair and balanced approach to handling our economy. What is the most important aspect of what we're trying to propose is common sense approach to solving our budget problems. And we've introduced over the last session a number of initiatives that we believe will address those issues without unfairly burdening the poor, the disabled, the elderly, the weakest of our citizens, and more importantly, not burdening working families in Georgia. One of those proposals is House Bill 1066, which I introduced. It would provide a 2-year income tax surcharge on the wealthiest Georgians in our state. The surcharge would apply to only the top 1% of wage earners earning over $400,000 per year. Now, that surcharge would generate over $225 million a year in much-needed revenue for our state. This would allow us to fund county health departments, teacher workdays, fund domestic violence shelters, and Meals on Wheels for senior citizens. That's a common sense approach. This approach follows a very common sense model adopted by 8 other states last year, including North Carolina, by raising the income tax rate on just less than 1% of the top filers. A month ago or so, Oregon adopted a similar program. One of the reasons that this approach is so appealing and so much of an opportunity in Georgia is that our income tax system does not treat everyone fairly. Low and middle income working families spend most, if not all, of their income on food, shelter, health care, clothing, and utilities, the necessities. We are taking a much larger effective share of the money they need to live on for sales, property, and income taxes than for those who could easily afford to pay a bit more, the higher income wage earners in our state. Our state income tax is antiquated. It hasn't really been adjusted since 1935. It means that our top income tax rate is at 6%. We hit that rate at $10,000 a year in income for married couples. When those numbers were enacted over 80 years ago, $10,000 was enough to cover a couple living here in Georgia. That's no longer the case. So even though these families are spending everything they earn just to get by, they're paying the same 6% of their income in income tax as a family earning $200,000 or $300,000 or more each year, and those people are only using a fraction of their income for their basic necessities. The result is that taxes take a much bigger bite out of the incomes of working families than out of the pockets of the wealthiest Georgians. This bill is about fairness, and it's about common sense. It's a small step towards reevaluating Georgia's out-of-date tax system. For those families doing well, especially during this recession, it's only a fair way to ask that they contribute just a little bit more during this crisis to fund public infrastructure programs that are so vital to all of our citizens in the state. There's another program, a very common sense approach to the state income tax loophole that would generate another $450 million in income. Last week, the Ways and Means Committee in the House passed the bill, House Bill 1219, to eliminate the refundable portion of the low-income tax credit. Right now, that means that taxpayers who are earning below $20,000 a year are eligible for a tax credit that ranges from $5 to $26 with additional benefits available for the elderly and families with children.